the opposition, and forgive me, I like to see people's eyes. Former leader of the opposition, my good friend Peter Phillips, members of the executive of the Michael Manley Foundation, members of those entities related wholly or otherwise to the Michael Manley Foundation. And they asked me what I wanted to speak about today. And I thought, and I thought, and I thought. And I decided that there was only one thing which I could speak about. Yes, the word is love. Let me at the outset thank the foundation and the Manley family, with whom I spent a wonderful hour and a half today, for the absolute privilege of being able to deliver this lecture on the 100th birthday of a great Caribbean titan. And I do so conscious that 5 years ago, in 2020, I had the same privilege of doing that for Errol Walton Barrow, who, in spite of belonging to a different political party from the one that I lead, was among those great Caribbean, and in my case, Barbadian builders, father of independence, along with persons like Grantley Adams and Norman Washington Manley, and Tom Adams, who helped lay the foundation in our own case for a modern economy, and of course, Owen Arthur, who continued to lecture us week by week in cabinet about the benefits and the legacy of Michael Manley for 14 years. But you may be forgiven to believe that that might be the reason why I'm here alone. The truth is that as a very young child, in fact, in first form, I first got my first set of, I almost say bullying, from the sixth formers in Queen's College, from sitting on the sixth form veranda. I had the audacity to do so. But I was walking with a book, and they pulled the book from me to see what I was reading. And disappointed that it was not Mills and Boons or Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew, they then continued to rail me because the book was The Politics of Change by Michael Manley. I did not touch it again as a whole book until last Thursday, and reread it. And throughout this afternoon, we'll continue to reflect and better understand as an adult how much of what I came to represent and believe in was effectively shaped in those very early years in understanding the writings and the beliefs of Michael Manley. But there is one other story that I will share before getting into the meat of the occasion. Because in one's life, you remember when you have to wear a cast, especially when you have to wear it for 6 weeks. And in my life, I have worn a cast only once, on my left leg, knee down to ankle. And one morning, when I was about 16 or so, Errol Barrow called and said, "Tell your mother and your father, don't cook tonight. I'm bringing Michael and I'm coming." And I said, "Sure." And I said, "But by the way, let it be early because for the first time we're launching jazz at the Waterfront Cafe. And it is my first foray in managing the band down there with Arturo, who you now know as Arturo Tappan, and Nicholas Branca of Grammy fame. So I would like both of you to come." And he said yes. During the course of the evening, Michael put his drink behind him and the dog was making for it. And I felt I had a duty to defend the honor of the house and not let the dog drink from his glass. Little did I know that coral stone with moss on it can be very slippery, and my ankle went right under. But I was so intent, one, on securing the band being able to play again at the waterfront, and equally, to be able to say that two former prime ministers would have enjoyed what I'm sure they would have enjoyed had they gone to see it, that I insisted on ignoring the pain and going to carry Michael Manley and Errol Barra to hear jazz. The next morning, the foot was twice as big. And the lesson really is that I paid a huge, huge price for wanting to be able to share in the aura of two great Caribbean men on that night. I give you these few jokes and stories because, in a very real sense, you cannot talk about Michael Manley and his politics without appreciating Michael Manley and the man, and his utter and absolute charm and ability to make even me as a young teenager feel that there was purpose in all that we were doing, but that equally that there was a larger mission which embraced us all as Caribbean people. I would later spend many hours next to him at Brandon's tennis when he would come to Barbados, and I would usually be the one there next to them watching tennis at Paradise on that occasion. I am honored because when, and I hope that many of you who have not read it will still read it, pick up this seminal work, with the exception of maybe one chapter, the contents of this book remain as relevant today as they were when the book was written almost 50 years ago. And I'm conscious that in this book, you understand fully why the word is love came to represent so much of the policies and programs identified in a philosophy that saw people, that heard people, and that felt people. I am not the one to give you a historical treatise on all of the achievements of Michael Manley. But suffice it to say that in this small Caribbean, there are some things that stand out, if only because for too much of our history, our parliament was used as an instrument of oppression rather than a tool of enfranchisement and empowerment. That we have not even yet reached 100 years of being able to be firm craftsmen of our fate speaks volumes. But that we have, in this short period of time, been able to reverse aspects of our legislation that literally choked us and denied us the dignity of agency and the dignity of our humanity is a major, major accomplishment. In our case, it cut across many leaders. In yours, it did. But some of these things stand out purely because of the majesty of the legislative transformation and the social transformation. The repealing of the Master and Servants Act, an iniquitous piece of legislation that sought to bind us in as close to bonds of slavery without slavery being legal. The establishment of a national minimum wage, something that eluded many, many countries for many, many decades before you established it here. Maternity leave with pay, which we actually did slightly before you, but Michael Manley made sure that you did it. Gender equity and pay scales. Other laws, as we heard tonight, that outlawed bastardy, as we did too, around the same time. A law that established your National Housing Trust, I'm told, that transformed the fate of so many of your citizens. But it is not simply in the announcement and the passage and the recitation of these policies that it matters. It is also in the essence of the man, believing that fundamental to the building of a society is the dignity to be accorded to each and every citizen, to see, hear, and feel each and every citizen. And we take this sometimes for granted because the world in which we live doesn't even admit of it. Countries that are large sometimes don't see or feel small countries. The reality is that it is a rare, rare virtue. And for the last 6 years, I started to reflect on how much the world looked like 100 years ago. And that in truth and in fact, we are in the throes of an inflection point, a historic movement that really, really, today, causes us to have to pause. And the danger is that we might be at risk of being distracted from the fundamental things that truly make a difference to our planet and to our people, and by extension, to our Caribbean civilization.